إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. وقال الشيخ العلامة الإمام قدوة الأنام موفق الدين قدام المقدسي رحمه الله ورضاه: الحمد لله المحمود بكل لسان المعبود في كل زمان الذي لا يخلو من علمه مكان ولا يشغله شأن من شأن، جل عن الأشباه والأنداد وتنزه عن الصاحبة والأولاد ونفذ حكمه في جميع العباد. لا تمثل العقول بالتفكير ولا تتوهم القلوب بالتصوير، ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير، له الأسماء الحسنى والصفات العلى. الرحمن على العرش استوى، له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وما بينهما وتحت الثرى، وإن تجهر بالقول فإنه يعلم السر وأخفى. أحاط بكل شيء علما وقهر كل مخلوق عزة وحكمة، ووسع كل شيء رحمة ووسع ربنا كل شيء علما. يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون به علما. موصوف بما وصف به نفسه في كتابه العظيم وعلى لسان نبيه الكريم، وكل ما جاء في القرآن أو صح عن المصطفى عليه السلام من صفات الرحمن وجب الإيمان به وتلقيه بالتسليم والقبول، وترك التعرض له بالرد والتأويل والتشبيه والتمثيل. وما أشكل من ذلك وجب إثباته لفظا وترك التعرض لمعنى، ونرد علمه إلى قائله ونجعله عهدته على ناقله، اتباعا لطريق الراسخين في العلم الذين أثنى الله عليهم في كتابه المبين، وقوله سبحانه وتعالى: والراسخون في العلم يقولون آمنا به كل من عند ربنا. وقال في ذم مبتغي التأويل المتشابه تنزيله: فأما الذين في قلوبهم زيغ فيتبعون ما تشابه منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء تأويله وما يعلم تأويله إلا الله، وجعل ابتغاء تأويله علامة على الزيغ وقرنه بابتغاء الفتنة في الذم، ثم حجبهم عما أملوا وقطع أطماعهم عما قصدوا. وقوله سبحانه وتعالى وقوله سبحانه برواية: وما يعلم تأويله إلا الله. قال الإمام أبو عبد الله أحمد محمد بن حنبل في قول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم: إن الله ينزل إلى السماء الدنيا وإن الله يرى في القيامة، وما أشبه هذه الأحاديث نؤمن بها ونصدق بها لا كيف ولا معنى. Alhamdulillah. The Imam, this is the opening portions that we're looking to take a look at today of Lum'ah, and we'll be looking at page 54 inshallah, where we'll be looking to read from and starting the text today. So we want to start with the biography of the commentator on page 54, which is headed with the commentator. So inshallah, if you start, Brother Walid, from reading.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Known in his contemporary as the teacher of the scholars, the alim, the scholar of the principles of fiqh, the scholar of fiqh, the grammarian, he is Abdul Qadir ibn Ahmed ibn Mustafa ibn Ahmed Rahim ibn Muhammad ibn Abdul Rahim ibn Badran as-Sadi Ad-Dumi Ad-Damashqi al-Hanbali. Born in the year 1265 to the righteous family, his father Sheikh Ahmed Ad-Dumi died 1317, was known to the people as a pious man, while the grandfather of the Imam was a marja in his own right and the scholar. Imam Mustafa Ad-Dumi 1322. Imam Abdul Qadir ibn Badran Ad-Dumi learned the Quran from his father and moved quickly to increase his knowledge. He learned Dalil al-Talib from his grandfather along with a number of other texts. His next teacher was Imam Muhammad ibn Uthman ibn Abbas al-Khatib Ad-Dumi 1308. Again, Dalil al-Talib was gone through, as well as its commentaries. Then they went and read Mukhtasar al-Ifadat by Imam al-Balbani 1033. Imam Ad-Dumi then headed to Damascus after he completed his work with his teacher in Duma and studied with one of the Muraja of the period, Imam Ahmed ibn Hassan al-Sharti, 1306, completing the work in fiqh and focusing on inheritance. His work also took him to study higher math as well as some portions of theoretical math. He also filled his time with studying the 6 books of Ahadith with teachers of and memorizing them. After some 6 years in Damascus, he suffered the loss of his teacher, his father, and then his grandfather. He turned to Duma and taught in one of the larger masjids, but attracted attention and criticism due to his rare positions and rulings that he was giving.
Because of the fact that he was a mujtahid in his own right, but the people of Duma are used to the province of Duma, when also the city of Duma. So Duma is also a province, and it includes Duma, Dumayya, Ruhayba, all these other cities. They're used to one maslak and way of teaching, and because he's teaching rare rulings, which are not the Mu'tamid rulings, it caused some difficulties with some of the people who did not want to be involved with the minority rulings. People were of one accord. But by being a mujtahid, he also has his right to make his ijtihad.
This led to his leaving Duma and heading to Damascus. Scholars of Umayyad family central masjid approached him and asked him to teach, and upon his tacit approval, he became the first permanent non-Ash'ari scholar to teach there in perhaps 1 century or more. He taught fiqh, tafsir, and math, and inheritance.
Okay, so understand this. The Jami Bani Umayyah is one of the premier places where people study in Syria, in particular in Damascus. And it is a similar to Al-Azhar, in which all 4 schools of fiqh are taught. And the kutub and the different things that are learned there, people go through them and learn them. The only issue is you will most likely have to buy your own books. And the dorms, they don't have on-site dorms that you stay at like Al-Azhar. You might have to stay at dorms around it.
In addition to this, the Imam taught in other areas in the city and drew a good number of students who came to benefit and obtain blessings. Also, during this time, the king of Arabia, after the Salafi takeover of the peninsula, asked the Imam to become the marja over Arabia. After some convincing, the Imam agreed. The reason for this is twofold. One is that the Salafi people needed further inquiries to be answered.
They murdered so many scholars.
Needed further inquiries to be answered from abroad.
Right.
Secondly,
because that's the second one. So the first one is that the Salafis murdered so many scholars.
Yeah. Secondly, the marja of the Hanbali school have always exclusively been from Iraq, Sham, and then Egypt. This had been established in writing at least since 1100. Notable rulings: the Imam ruled that Sufi groups today are phony and part of the satanic secret societies to undermine Islam and the Muslim orthodoxy.
Okay, now this ruling is on the Georgis blog, so if you look up Sufi Brotherhoods, it should pull up his ruling.
A very strong position was taken against banknotes that are referred to as money. The Imam rightly diagnosed this money as debt notes and stated that the true nature of money is that of stale or dead.
Now, the reference to that is a fatwa that is 85 pages, which I'm working on translating, inshallah, but there's a lot of notes to go with this. He discusses what is debt, what is money, and he accurately assesses the fractional banking system. In his time, when fractional banking was only just becoming popular, and when the fractional banks, there weren't any banks in the Muslim world at this time. The first one was just being brought in. So it's only been 100 years since we'd had banks in the Muslim world. It's a very new phenomenon.
If there are numerous Jum'ah prayer occurring in one place, this is permitted in so far as there is a valid reason for them, such as in the case of overcrowding or uneven distribution of population throughout the different masjids.
Okay, now this ruling is several Jum'ahs in one locale. That is on the Mirath blogspot, and it's also on the Jurji's site. So that ruling has also been published in English.
Only 3 people are required for Jum'ah prayer to be valid. This was especially novel, as the position of the school was always that it was 40 men.
Okay, so that's a rarity of his rulings that he said it can be 3. That's not the Mu'tamid, but he gave that statement.
It is impermissible for Muslims, except under pain of death, loss of limb, or lifetime incarceration, to transact with banks on a regular basis with things such as loans, usury gains, and such.
Okay, so that's a ruling that's also in his book on banking. So he discusses how to deal with banks, what you can and can't deal with when you're dealing with them, which we've discussed in a truncated fashion already.
Imam Abdul Qadir ibn Badran, may Allah have mercy on him, was one of the first Muraja to allow family photos or portraits to be to establish family lineage and keep evidence or records of family.
And the reason for this is because he allowed it in those circumstances where his ruling on photography is also on the Jurji's blog. So if someone looks up photos and photography on the Jurji's blog, it is there. Many scholars before that time, or at the same time as the Imam, had flatly said that it was haram. So there still are a good portion of scholars that think it's haram, although they're the minority now.
It was also stated by the Marja that it was valid for men to wear silver jewelry, such as rings, but even necklaces. This was a rare and minority ruling, while most believed such things are effeminate.
Now, these discussions, his situation that men may wear silver chains, and he brought out a hadith and text of this. All the rulings there agreed upon, with the exception of this one, where he and a small minority of scholars said that one may wear a silver chain. If it's silver, it can't be gold, it can be silver, because you can wear a ring, also a chain and such.
Imam Ad-Dumi despised the beliefs of the movement built by Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, undermined its beliefs and affirmed orthodoxy, but often believed that the founder was either separate to or innocent of the false beliefs in the movement. The Imam also came out of the time period in which many of the Salafi theology books were not openly shown, and the regime claimed to foster togetherness.
Okay, so during this time, which is the same time as Muhammad Ali al-Maliki, a lot of people thought that, well, it's not him that this is coming from, it's coming from his students and the people after him that were the problem. Whereas a lot of the books that had been printed before against it, the 60-year plus response of literature, some of that got buried during the time of Imam Ad-Dumi and Badran. So it seemed to some scholars that, oh, well, it can't be him, it must be them, because some people outside of Arabia did not have detailed knowledge on him, and because of this, it led to these issues. That's why you'll find some people today that are soft on kufr or soft on shirk, meaning soft on Salafi, soft on cults. They're not necessarily kuffar altogether, although some of them are guilty of stating major kufr and major shirk, because to liken kufr and shirk to Islam is major kufr and major shirk. But they're not necessarily kuffar in all totality, because they don't understand that there's an ijma that's already covered all this. This stuff has already been dealt with, and much of this knowledge has been buried. And if you talk about Islam in English and details of Islam in English, that's even more so the case. Huh?
It was wrongly attributed to the Imam that he denied the second coming of the Messiah and that of the Al-Imam Mahdi, based upon the statements he made about hadith in that regard and verses.
Okay, so there was a misunderstanding of some people had, because the Imam, in discussing the coming of Al-Mahdi, Al-Imam Al-Mahdi alayhi salam, he discussed the ahadith, and there are different chains and transmissions of ahadith. And because the more popularly quoted ahadith in his time were the da'if, or in the invalid ahadith, it seemed in some people's mind that he was denying the coming of the Mahdi, he was denying Nabi Isa alayhi salam. But he has other kutub where he discusses not the ahadith, just the doctrine of the Mahdi and Nabi Isa alayhi salam, where he affirms it very clearly.
However, such an attribution can be shown to be mistaken when someone reads through all the Imam's books, and especially cross-references with one of his final texts, Al-Madkhal, where it can be read that he considers both doctrines part of Muslim theology, and whoever denies them as being gravely astray.
All right, now on the Jurji's blog, we also have Imam Abdul Badran's discussion on the Mahdi, which we covered in class on the Signs of the End of Time, and also notes from Imam Safarini on the topic.
Later life and death. The Imam is the author of more than 15 books on diverse topics, as well as 3 texts of fatwa that he has left behind. He would undergo another tribulation in which former Ottoman scholar Muhammad Zahid al-Kawthari made false accusations about him that could have led to his death.
So he spread some rumors about some things that he had heard from some other people, and because of those rumors and things that he spread from other people, it caused all matter of fitna, right? And so because of that, the Imam, you have to understand, during this time, there's a huge amount of jihad that's happening against the French. There's jihad happening against the British. There's jihad happening against the Freemasons. There's jihad happening against many different people. And because of this happening, there's a lot of confusion. So for someone to come and accuse him or Abdul Majid of likening Allah to his creation or whatever else, almost undermined these jihads at this time. But fortunately, the Mujahideen, they didn't listen to this, they carried forward. But these types of things, even if it's well meant, when it undermines jihad and fight, in which jihad, when we're talking about in this sense of qital al-kuffar, armed combat against the kuffar, when it undermines this, right, it takes some of the shine and luster off of these sheikhs when they do this.
Fortunately, the truthfulness of Ad-Dumi and his creed were upheld.
Upheld. Yeah. That's a typo. Should be upheld.
He died on Sunday, 29 Rabi al-Awwal, 1346, after long illness, and left behind no children.
Now, he belongs to a class of imams through history, they're a minority, who decided to leave off nikah in favor of knowledge, known as azuba. They decided that we won't marry, we won't have children, and we'll just dedicate our lives to the knowledge and nothing else. So he did this. Imam Taqi ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, did this, who died 728 Hijri. Imam Yahya an-Nawawi, rahimahullah, who died 676 Hijri, he did this. So it's not unknown. It's not the norm, but there have been imams in history who said, I will dedicate my life to Islam and not marry and have children and just do this.
Unfortunately, after his death, his library in Duma was gutted and destroyed by vandals and devastated. The same things happened in Damascus in an annexed library he owned. This was due to the continued friction between Sunnis and Alawis, as well as the widespread unrest in the areas as the French pulled out of Sham.
Okay, so this is the life of the Imam. Now we're going to look at the author of the text. So the commentator we know is Imam Abdul Badran. The author of the text, Imam Wafiddin Qudama, we're going to go over his life.
His name is Abdullah, the son of Ahmed, the son of Muhammad, the son of Qudama, the son of Mikdam, the son of Nasr, the son of Abdullah, the son of Hudayfa, the son of Muhammad, the son of Yaqub, the son of Al-Qasim, the son of Ibrahim, the son of Ismail, the son of Yahya, the son of Muhammad, the son of Salim, the son of companions Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah have mercy on him, and all of the aforementioned.
Okay, so he is a direct descendant of Umar radiallahu anhu. So everyone from the Banu Qudama is a direct descendant of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. So the Banu Qudama, they came to be known as the Banu Qudama. Then in the age after that, they're called the Banu Abdul Hadi. And then the era after that, which is into this era, they come to be known as the Sa'di or the Suwaydan. So that family is still alive.
He was born in the town of Jama'il in the city of Nablus in today's Israel around the year 1146 AD, into his family of Hanbali judges and preachers.
Okay, now Jama'il today, well, dialectically, is sometimes pronounced Jama'in. So it's this in Palestine, in the West Bank.
He grew up studying the Quran with his father, Imam Ahmad ibn Qudama, who had been the chief judge, magistrate, and Friday preacher in the town of Jama'il. All was going well until Christians from Europe invaded the area in the year 551 or 1156, laying waste to the entire area, sacking Jerusalem and destroying any and all vestiges of Islam, Judaism, and Eastern Christianity in Jerusalem, Nablus, and beyond. The family became refugees after losing a hard-fought battle and traveling to Damascus in today's Syria.
Okay, so the first wave when they arrived after the edict of Pope Urban II, the Muslims lost the first leg of the Crusades. Now, the Crusades were 250 years. Okay, the first wave of it we lost, just like the Spanish Inquisition. The first wave we lost, then we defeated them. So we defeated them in Crusades after 250 years. We defeated them after the Inquisition, which is more than 500 years. And we've defeated them in Afghanistan and Iraq, and we'll beat them again. Continue.
Soon after, the young Abdullah moved to the Salihiyah district of Damascus, where he would finish memorizing the Quran in 553 or 1158 at 11 years of age. Upon completion of the Book of Allah, he began to study the commentaries on the text statements of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, along with the foundational works of the Hanbali legal school. He showed a natural appetite towards learning, aptitude towards learning, and began to study larger and more detailed matters with regards to his faith. He benefited from the company of many great Imams, such as his older brother Abu Umar ibn Qudama, his first cousin Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid, and the younger brother Imam Ad-Din Ibrahim ibn Abdul Wahid. He studied from other scholars outside his family, such as Abdul Mu'ali ad-Damashqi and Abdul Wahid al-Azdi. In the year 560 or 1165, at 20 years of age, Abdullah set out to become a resident of Baghdad in Iraq. His time there would be extremely fruitful, as this was the home of the Hanbali school and the companions who set down its principles on the cool landscape of Al-Basra, which trickled to Baghdad. He would remain in the country for 4 long years. Scholars who gave him time and qualifications in various subjects, including the following Hanbali sages: Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, chief judge and magistrate of the courts of Iraq, Ibn Futyan and Nahrawani, Ibn Ad-Dakak, Ibn al-Bati ad-Dajaji, Abdul Fadl Jali, al-Mubarak al-Sirafi, Abu Bakr al-Bazar, as well as giants in Hadith and memorizer of Hadith collections, Shuhda bin Ahmed ad-Dinuri. These are just some of the luminaries whom he was blessed to meet while on hand in the city of Baghdad. When Imam Abdullah returned after 4 years away, he was in the ranks of scholarship. He had already written more than 10 large-sized books, one of them being in 10 volumes set on the Hanbali legal code. Now a scholar, he was well versed in the school and began assisting in giving rulings, and also was busy teaching the sciences to students. His students included nephews, cousins, and strangers, all of whom were dedicated to studying Islam. At the end of his writing career, he had penned in total about 250 texts, many of them running into the several volumes. Allah had benefited the Imam with wisdom and caused him to use it. Another turning point also came in the later years of this noble scholar. The leader of the Muslim army, Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, in the year 583 or 1187 had prepared an army for battle and was taking recruits to recover Jerusalem and the surrounding areas from the Christians of Europe, who had converted Masjid al-Aqsa into a church, used the Dome of the Rock as a horse stable, and expelled most of the Jews and large numbers of Eastern Christians from the city. By the time full mobilization of the war has come in
should
swing.
be was in swing. That's a typo.
Was in swing. Imam Wafiquddin was 48 years old. His brother Abu Umar ibn Qudama being 56. They and thousands of other Hanbalis in their black tents gave their pledge to move forward, and the area was taken away from the Western Christendom and returned to the Muslims. Subsequently, the Muslims' sanctuaries were purified and Jews could return, and the Holy Sepulchre and Bethlehem church compounds were reopened by the indigenous people. Imam Wafiquddin lived a long life filled with teaching, preaching, and fighting for truth. Although he and his wife had numerous children, none lived past infancy, but perhaps on a good note. Those who act on what he wrote, take his knowledge to heart, and stand for his principles are in some way the Imam's children. Imam Wafiquddin ibn Qudama died in the year 620 or 1223. Was put to rest in the cemetery not far from his school and lies in the same location today. May Allah have mercy on all the scholars mentioned in this introduction. It is with this closing that we invite the reader to this text, his beneficial advice, this being among the last texts he wrote before returning to his Lord. The text that followed this short introduction is a translation of the well-known Arabic text Lum'at ul-Itiqad al-Hadi ila Sabil Rishad, a document dealing with creed and its foundations. The Lum'at ul-Itiqad was written by Imam Wafiquddin ibn Qudama as a summary of all 12 books on creed written but more than 400 years before him by Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. After being combined and condensed, Imam Wafiquddin ibn Qudama left many of the textual arguments in place while attempting to make the text rhyme. The translator has attempted to keep the meter as well as the paragraph arrangement of the author, as this text was intentionally written a certain way to be memorized using a certain method. Thus there are 8 fusul or sections of the Lum'ah, which in the original manuscripts are represented by small spaces in page or by indented paragraphs. These were left by the author to show how the text is to be memorized. 74 paragraphs, which in the original manuscript are known through markings or the word beginning new paragraphs written larger.
Okay, now we'll talk about the narration of the text. So the transmission of how the text came down to us, how it reached us.
When I looked at printed copies of the text in English and Arabic, I noticed that although they were in different languages, they all had one thing in common: they were wrong. Printed copies were given precedence over manuscripts. Publishing houses ran together different narrations, and the reader was left with nothing but trinkets and not the prize at all. And I knew that it would then be necessary to publish the text properly, so that all the blessings could be realized. Lum'at al-Itiqad has 3 narrations that have been handed down to us. When the text was written, Imam Wafiquddin ibn Qudama, may Allah have mercy on him, may Allah be pleased with him, wrote our variations in the text when teaching the students that helped explain certain passages or parts that might need elucidation. In this case, the text became self-explaining in a way. The 3 narrations in which the text reached us are through the following main collectors: Imam Muhammad ibn al-Khubbaz. This is by far the rarest but most prized for the students, due to the fact that every narrator from the author down to the last century was a chief Qadir. The layout of this form would require the student to read most of the paragraphs in one breath. Would require the student to read some of the paragraphs in one breath as well as incorporate the verses into the text while speaking. Paragraph markers are few, and sometimes the underlying assumption is that the student are going to run them together as long as the theme is related. It is possible that one could recite all 8 fusul of Lumatul Itikal in succession based on this narration. This would then mean that the paragraph stops would be ignored and the fusul markings given precedence. Imam Umar ibn Ghazi ibn Ali al-Maqdisi 779. The narration of this Imam is the most popular and well known, and the one chosen by the translator for use. The pagination suggests reading markers, fusul, paragraphs, breaks, and punctuations were utilized solely from this narration. Students will find it easy to memorize and learn from this form of the text and make use of the text. Now
this should be each paragraph. That's a typo.
Between each paragraph, or even every few sentences, the student will be able to take a breath and read further. It is often referred to as the Badrani reading, as it was popularized by the Ibn Badran families, great saints, and often some students might only know of this one.
Okay, so the Badrani reading, it came to be popularized as this because the great Imam Abdul Ibn Abdul Qawi, who's also Ibn Badran, he died 699 Hijri. He popularized this particular narrative. So most students of knowledge, and most people will be familiar with this reading over all the other ones.
Sheikha Fatima al-Wasitiyya died 705 Hijri. She was given permission to transmit this and the Imam's other books through her teachers in the year 655 in Damascus. This is perhaps the hardest copy to learn from, as there are as many commentaries, notes, and it is usually mentioned amongst a bundle of other texts, all of which are written without consonantal markings and paragraph and sentence endings.
Okay, so they're written without paragraph markers and also consonantal markings. If you look at some of the manuscripts of the Lumma transmitted through Sheikh Fatima al-Wasitiyya, often it's without consonantal markings, because some of the fuqaha and the big imams, when they write their books and they're without commentaries, so they have very short notes, they don't even put the markings. So you have to know what it says, because you will not find the nuqat or the dots on the kha, the jeen, these other things. You have to have already memorized the Lumma to know what the context and what the purpose is behind it.
The one reading this would have already read the others or memorized enough to understand them. The reader in this matter would quote smaller paragraphs and give lengthier commentary to the student. Imam Muhammad Ahmad as-Safarini, one imam using this narration, sometimes took a number of pages to explain one principle in the text. It is my sincere desire that the text is readable, enjoyable, and edifying for any and all who read it. We ask Allah that He accept that which I have done for His way alone, seeking to see Him on the day of resurrection as promised in the Quran, and with Allah is every success. Wassalam, brothers in Islam. Brother in Islam, Al-Hajj Abu Jafar Alhamdulillah.
Okay, now, when we talk about the Lumma and commentaries, we need to say something. This commentary is a Sharhun Yasir. It is a short commentary on the Lumma. There are other commentaries that are based on or explicitly about the Lumma. Okay. One such commentary, the smallest, is Najat al-Khalaf fi i'tiqad al-Salaf. Najat al-Khalaf fi i'tiqad al-Salaf. This is by Ibn Qa'id al-Najdi, died 1078 Hijri. Najat al-Khalaf fi i'tiqad al-Salaf. This is a very slim text, and it deals with the main themes of the Lumma. The main themes. That's a small one. The Sharh al-Yasir by Abdul Qadir ibn Badran is a Sharh Yasir. It's a small Sharh, but it deals with more than the Najat al-Khalaf. It deals with more. Another one is the Nihaya of Imam Ibn Hamdan, who dies 695 Hijri. The Imam Ibn Hamdan dies 695 Hijri, rahimahullah, and he has the Nihaya. This text is a more encompassing discussion on the Lum'ah and its contents. The next after that is what's sometimes is called the Aqidatul Balbani. Aqidatul Balbani. It's written by Imam al-Balbani, and he died 1083 of the Hijri. This is another commentary, but what he really did is he took the Lum'ah, boiled it down into a poetic meter, and then built it back up and included it in his book Mukhtasar al-Ifadat. That's really what happened. The final and largest commentary is by Imam Muhammad Ahmad al-Safarini, and he dies 1189. Some say 1188. Both are legitimate. His Lawami' al-Anwar is 2 volumes, in which what he did is, the first thing he did is he combined all the commentaries that I mentioned, other than Ibn Badran, because Ibn Badran had not been born yet. He combines all the commentaries and texts. He combines them all together, then he boils them down and creates a matn, a rhyming text from this. This rhyming text is known as a Durr al-Mudiyya. Sometimes I call it Durr al-Mudiyya. It's a rhyming text. He creates this rhyming text. So this rhyming text is all those books that I just mentioned, other than Badran, boiled down into a rhyming text, and then he makes a commentary on his own text. The result of this is known as Lawami al-Anwar. This is the most exhaustive, detailed. This is the equivalent of taking a rag, for those that have ever done their washing by hand. You take the rag and you wring it out until it's dry. Every different angle and layer of the different narratives of the Lum'ah, he wrung out. And that is the point. Now, when someone studies this, the first order of business they do is they memorize the Lum'ah. That's the first thing that happens. Then after this, they will do Najat al-Khalaf or Sharh al-Yasir. And Sharh al-Yasir, they do this. Then after this, the Nihaya. Then after the Nihaya, Aqidat al-Balbani. If they decide that they want to go to the Lawami', now they've got to memorize the Durrat al-Mudiyya or Durrat al-Mudiyya. If they decide to go for it. Because now what you'll be doing is, in the interim of discussing all those matun, all that matn, when you memorize the Lum'ah and you study those commentaries, you're looking at Ahlul Sunnah and what their beliefs are, and it runs into 3 areas. What you must have Iman in, what you're not allowed to have Iman in. So there's things you must have Iman in. Things you're not allowed to have Iman in. because it entails kufr, shirk, and things it's permitted to have iman in. That's why we always say, we don't speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can Allah do this or can he say, we say, is it permitted to understand that Allah does, or has Allah said this, or has he done this? We never start off, because can assumes lack of ability and attributes an ability to Allah. It's major kufr, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said twice in the Quran, فَعَلِ مَا يُرِيدُ, he does whatever he wills. So we don't attribute an ability to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With Lawami al-Anwar, the biggest commentary, you're now dealing with differences of opinion within Ahl Sunnah in branch issues. So first of all, you dealt with the cults, comparing Ahl Sunnah, listen, these are the errors and issues, the 72, these are errors and issues. Within the Lawami, now you're talking about discussions within Ahl Sunnah in branch issues. And there's also a listing in there of different people different imams that fell apart in certain areas because they engaged in ijtihad, in creed, which you're not supposed to do. You do some fiqh without a creed. So they fell apart, right? Especially under the topic of people speaking on what Allah has ordained, the qada and the qadr. More imams fell apart in that issue. Lesser imams fell apart than in any other issue. Because they're talking about things that they don't know and they thought that they were given a good answer. Thought, oh yeah, this makes it. The area of qada and qadr is the shortest area in the Lum'ah and other creed texts. Because it's what we have, it's among the areas that we have the least knowledge about. When you find people writing volumes and volumes about qada and qadr, know that that person is going astray. Because there's no way he's got enough information to write all that, because we've not been given volumes and volumes of information about qadr. When you look at the early generations and people that follow that, the area on qada and qadr is always very short. It's mostly ayat and ahadith and statements of qudr. That's generally what you're going to find. So that's a short overview of what you look at when you study these areas. People often want to study comparative matters of i'tiqad or whatever else, but they're not established on what they're supposed to be established on. How are you trying to study about the 72 and you don't know what you're established upon? You yourself may be from the 72. You should be established upon what you're established upon. We are not from Ahl Sunnah because we're not Shia. This is what's known as bipolarism. It's nonsense. We're Ahl Sunnah because we are. All the 72 sects came out of it. We're Ahl Sunnah because these are the affairs that we're upon from the first few generations and all these matters. The 72, all the 72 came out of Ahl Sunnah. So when you find a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always comparing between, well, they say this, you shouldn't be doing this. You should be established on what you're upon. And then when that's established, then you recognize evil when it comes. The more time you spend arguing and debating, which is why one of my specializations in the area was to study Rudud Shubuhat, which was to study the cults and different groups. But this was after detailed discussion of, we had to memorize Lum'ah, we had to memorize the Bayan Sunnah, we had to memorize, this came after Mutun and also after Kitab Hukm Murtad and other things. People are trying to go deeply into areas that they're set to destroy themselves and destroy those around them. And there's a disease that comes from this. So you have to be very, very careful. So this is about dealing with the i'tiqad of Ahl Sunnah in this short commentary, and also talking about what everyone's established upon. The end is a comparison, the end of the matn and this commentary is a comparison between Ahl Sunnah and the cults, the more famous cults, only because everything else has been established. Then you say, don't be like these, don't be like that. Everything else is established first. So we start with the introduction on page 71 of the commentator. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi al-Wahid al-Ahad al-Fard al-Samad. والصلاة والسلام على نبيه الذي قمع الشرك فضمحل بصولة الوحي وشرد وهدى إلى الصراط المستقيم.
In the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate. Praise be to Allah, the unique, the one, the only, existent, the sole existent, the eternal, and peace and blessings be upon his Prophet, the annihilator of idolatry, the bringer to fruition of the intent of revelation, the guide to the straight path.
فمن تمسك بهديه فاز ومن ضل عنه فمأواه الجحيم وعلى آله وصحبه السادة والأطهار وأئمة الفرق الناجية الأبرار.
Whoever should take hold of his guidance is saved, while whoever is led astray, his home is the fire. And may the peace and blessings be upon his family, the companions, the pure leaders, and the righteous imams of the saved sect.
وبعد.
In terms of subject at hand, I say the following.
Okay, so normally, أما بعد or بعد or وبعد is said when you're introducing a topic. Now, we've mentioned this before, so I won't belabor the point on the conditions of how a book is supposed to be laid out to be considered a book. And one of the things is أما بعد or بعد or وبعد or فبعد, right? Other things include the name, what the subject is, the salat and salam on Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, praising Allah, extolling his praise, right? These are all the conditions that go with what is considered a book. If it's lacking of these things, it is not a book.
These words are spoken by the slave that needs the mercy of his Lord, namely Abdul Qadir ibn Ahmed ibn Mustafa, known as Ibn Badran. May Allah forgive him and all the Muslims.
Ameen. فيقول الفقير لرحمة ربه عبد القادر بن أحمد بن مصطفى المعروف بن بدران غفر الله له ولجميع المسلمين لما كفلني حضرة الحاج عيسى بن رميح العقيلي السلفي جزاه الله خير الجزاء وأحسن إليه وإليه بالوقوف على طبع لمعة الاعتقاد.
The respected Al-Hajj Isa ibn Rami al-Ukaili as-Salaf.
Okay, now this expression as Salafi, the reason why this was used, this was before the group that took it on, the title as Salafi. In this particular time, just before the foundation of the Saud state, and they took on the title Salafi as their group name, people would often use Salafi at the end of a name in reference to the i'tiqad that they were upon. And then you'd find the Ash'aris and Maturidis at the end of their name, they'd have Khalafi, because it was in reference to the era they belonged to. So you'd find some Ash'ari scholars, so-and-so and so-and-so, Al-Khalafi. It wasn't their family, it meant the i'tiqad, the books they studied were the books of the Khalaf, or the i'tiqad. And then you had books, the Salaf, the people of Salaf. So Safarini has it at the end of his name, some others have it at the end of their name. But once the group used this, they took this title as Salafi, which was an adjective, and they made it into a noun. It fell out of use and people stopped using it. So then it became something that was associated necessarily with that group.
The respected Al-Hajj Isa ibn Rami al-Ukaili as-Salafi, may Allah reward him in the best way and show goodness to us and him, brought to my attention the reading of the text for printing, the illuminations of the creed.
Okay, so the illumination of the creed is the translation of Lum'at. Sometimes I translate as brilliance of belief, but I found that the closest is probably illumination of the creed, because Lum'ah is like a flame where it's in the portion where it becomes blue, where it's about something's about to be cooked or something's blue. So it's illumination. They were about to print the Lum'ah, and it had to do with the fact that they noticed that in some of the printed copies that were being used, because you have to talk about this before going forward. There was an attempt in the time of Imam Abdul Badran and after, there was an attempt to water down the Arabic language. They started first by watering down the Ottomans, which was not hard. They started first by watering down the Ottomans. They replaced the language of the Ottomans, which is known as Usmanje. This language is not spoken at all anymore. It's called Usmanje, which is with the Arabic letters and the language that the Ottomans as a group of people spoke. It's called Usmanje. This alphabet was replaced with the Latin alphabet, which is what you see in today's Turkey. They swapped out the people in Turkey to Greece and other areas and moved Greeks and everything into Turkey, which is why I call them Turkish, because these people are actually not Turks. Then they changed the Turkish language, and you have the person to thank for this, Mustafa Kemal, who later changed his name to Kemal Atatürk. He's the one that changed the Turkish language. So if you speak Osmanlı or read Osmanlı to Turkish people, they can't understand it. Took their language from them. Destroyed everything, took it from them. You know who can understand Osmanlı though? Really good speakers of Urdu and Iranians. They can understand Osmanlı. If you read Osmanlı to them, very, very dedicated people that are fluent Urdu enough to where they have a lot of Persian, they can understand Osmanlı. And Iranian speakers, they can understand Osmanlı. But the actual people to whom this language was intended for cannot. They attempted to replace the Arabic alphabet with Latin. English people and French people were killed all over the Arab world. They say in some parts of Cairo that their necks were slit open and they pulled their tongue through the neck, suggesting that we should modernize the mushafs of the Quran so that the spellings will be matched up with the spellings that we'll use for the Latin alphabet. You know how many people were killed for suggesting that? They killed them. And as an attempt was also made in which they started printing modern Arabic dictionaries. Wurtabet's Arabic dictionary. You know, Wurtabet is a Coptic Christian. He's not even a Muslim. He's not even Arab. But he puts together the Arabic dictionary. The founder of modern Arab nationalism is a man named Saad Zaghloul, who's actually not an Arab. He's the founder of Arab nationalism. He's actually not an Arab. Wurtabet was not. He was a Coptic Christian. Ilyas, who did the Ilyas Egyptian dictionary, Ilyas he came from a family of Coptic patriarchs. Why are non-Arab Christian Coptic patriarchs playing a massive part in the Arabic dictionaries? Whereas originally, Lisan al-Arab, which is on the shelf over there, on some level was studied by everyone. You know, before the monarchy in Egypt was overthrown, do you know that Fusha was standard Arabic? That was standard. Even though Farouk and Fuad, those two, they're actually Albanians. They're the descendants of Muhammad Ali Pasha, but they spoke Fusha. That was the standard. And the sign of that coming to an end was when Nasser came to power and spoke dialectical Arabic on radio and television. That's how you knew that we're in a different era now. But interestingly enough, when you speak to some Arabs who haven't studied the history of this, they call this an-Nahdatul Arabiya, the Arab Renaissance. Why would this be the Arab Renaissance? So understand, people that didn't know anything about Arabic were printing, in many of these early printing houses, are printing Arabic books. And so Imam Abdul Badran is in that time. Just like today, it won't just be, say, well, we have to worry about printing houses because people of bid'ah they'll change things. It's not just that. It's people who don't know the Arabic language trying to read manuscripts or trying to read books. And because a book is very popular, it's commercially viable. And because of that, they try to print Arabic books. And they print the Arabic books and they're riddled with mistakes, some of which are kufr. Because the mistakes, some of them, the way they're written, they're kufr. But there's money in it. And because there's money in printing these books, this happens. So the Imam, seeing this, he says, I'm going to do some printings to get around this. Because originally, up until recently, you had to pass books of fiqh, hadith, and other things. You had to pass this through fuqaha and people that sit down. Like what happens with the mushafs in Egypt and in Sham. They don't go to print until they've gone through fuqaha, they've been printed, they've checked, they've got the imams in the back. Well, most of them. And then you have the same thing with fiqh books and other things like this. This is why the first thing I do when I look at a mushaf, when I look at a book, I do what? I go to the back. Who gave this permission to go ahead? Who gave this? This is a habit you should have, not just for books about deen, but you should have this even about kafir books. You know the things you should look for when you read in English a book about any kafir subject? A bibliography. If they don't have a bibliography, what are the sources for this book? The bibliography is the footprints of the book saying, this is the makeup that I use to build this up. This is the makeup that I use. If you have an English book and it has no bibliography, and it's not an autobiography, so it's not fiction, it's not an autobiography, it's not sci-fi. This is supposed to be a legitimate book of history or something like this, and there's no bibliography, you have a right to ask questions. I don't buy that book. There's no bibliography, there's no notes. I don't buy that book. Because I know when I finish that book, now I have to go check out the bibliography to see what details were there in the bibliography. One book I bought recently, it's called A Little Matter of Genocide by Ward Churchill. It covers the history of 1492 to now of the arrival of invaders on the North American continent. You know, the bibliography is 50 pages. It took me 6 months to confirm all the details in that book going through the bibliography, but they're all there. That's why the bibliography is important. I can check against what Ward Churchill said to decide, is it true? Is this true? Did he really say it? It's all true. Some of Ward Churchill's interpretations of the data you might disagree with, but is the sourcing, is it there? Is it there? That's why I have to walk this middle path when I translate from Arabic to English. I have to have shed loads of notes, and then I have to have a bibliography. Why? To be honest. Also, for researchers who are interested, they can check out a bibliography. But to be an effective reader, this is one of the things you have to understand. And this is what the imams have to deal with. That's why it's so important. These kutub, these mutun, and this is the last point I'll mention. Al-Qallawi, the big imam, because when I was first learning in the Mahad, I didn't know what the Ajrumiyya was, which is one of the most authoritative books of Arabic grammar that you study to learn to mastery of the Arabic language. The one we studied was Qallawi, and Qallawi is based on Ajrumiyya, but I didn't know that because I didn't. So usually you learn either Ajrumiyya or an alternative. I didn't know the alternative. So I didn't know an Ajrumiyya. I knew this other one. At the end of the book, there's a dua that the author makes, Imam Al-Qallawi, where he makes dua to Allah and makes shafa'a to Allah, bijahi Ahmadi, with the person of Ahmad, meaning the Rasul. You know, some devil in one of the printed copies changed it in the matn. He had bihubbi Ahmadi. He said, with the love of Ahmed. And he had a note. I said, what's this note? And then it said in the note, فَقَدْ أَصْلَحْتُ الْمَتْن. I rectified the matn of this issue. Because of this, you know, that type of thing, my teachers had always said is grounds enough not to pray behind somebody. Not because they're kafir, but because they don't deserve to be in the post that they're in, because they're not handing the knowledge to you. The act of naqal, handing down ilm, is preserving it according to how it was given to you, and then handing it down. If you don't think that should be in there, then you should write your own commentary, your own book, or whatever else, and explain why it's not. But to actually change the matn, literally change the matn, is unforgivable. And once I saw the person did that, I said, okay, I need to know the name of the person that did this. Okay, never buy anything by this person. Don't sit with them. If I ever meet him in life, I know he says his name. No. Because I can't allow this. Same thing with people that print Riyadh al-Salihin and change things, or the Adhkar, visiting the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. And they put instead visiting his masjid. You stay away from those people. They change the matn the literal matn. That's what happens in an era of what's called the Arabic Renaissance. You have to watch these things carefully. That's why this is important what this Imam says.
I wanted to show some service to the text by giving the address of the ahadith therein, as well as clarifying some things that are ambiguous in its words. This shall be a small written endeavor.
أحببت أن أخدمها بلمعة في تخريج أحاديثها وبيان بعض ما أشكل ما يشكل من لغتها، وهي إن كانت كتابة يسيرة فإني سأخدم مذهب السلف فيما بعد في كل ما يساعدني الله تعالى عليه وبالله التوفيق ومنه المعونة، وجعلت ما كتبته مفصولا على الأصل كما ستراه أيها الواقف على هذا الكتاب والله الهادي.
I so desired to do a service to the way of the first three generations in any capacity in which Allah, exalted be He, shall so insist me, and in Allah is the success, and from Him comes the assistance in completion of the task. I have taken what I wrote and put it into subchapters based upon the original, as this was the hidden intent for you, dear reader, as it is a helpmate to reading the text, and Allah is the guide in that regard.
So you see, he helped us. So he said, I've taken what I wrote and put it into subchapters based upon the original. So he's broken it down into units for us. Subchapters based upon the original, as this was the hidden intent for you. So he's saying, I did this for you, to help you work out the text to make it easier for when you study it, when you memorize it, as it's a helpmate in reading the text. Now, we begin the text. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. قال الشيخ الإمام العالم الأوحد شرف الإسلام مفتي الفرق وقدوة الأنام أوحد الزمان موفق الدين أبو محمد عبد الله بن أحمد بن محمد بن قدامة المقدسي قدس الله روحه ونور ضريحه.
In the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate, and it is Him that we seek assistance and aid. It was uttered by the Shaykh.
The Shaykh is someone who's memorized the Quran and the 6,000 hadith that explain it.
It was uttered by the Shaykh, the Imam.
The Imam is the one that's done what the Shaykh has done, but he's also memorized the commentary literature and the ahadith that are built on top of the other things.
The unique scholar, the honor of Islam, mufti of the groups, role model for the people.
Role model for the people is qudwa. Role model means it's permitted to make taqleed of this person. It is permitted to make taqleed of this person and to imitate them, either because they've reached such a level in their memorization and hifz, or they're following someone else that does so. So that person's a qudwa. It's a role model. It's permitted for you to make taqleed of that person in their actions and what they've given you, although you don't know the detailed evidences and texts. And if they are mistaken, you're not taken into account for it. That's the qudwa.
Unique sign of the time, Muwafiquddin Abu Muhammad Abdul ibn Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi. May Allah sanctify his soul and illuminate his tomb.
صفات الله تبارك وتعالى.
Unit 1. The attributes of Allah, blessed and exalted is He. Praise be to Allah, surely He is praised in every language and worshipped in every age. He is the one who possesses knowledge of every place and locale. He is not confused with one matter over another. He is sanctified above any likeness and rivals, and exalted and pure of any need of consort or children. His judgment is carried out among all His slaves.
قال الدومي الأنداد جمع الند بكسر النون المثل والنظير وكذا النديد والنديدة.
Ad-Dumi. This word rivals is the Arabic word andad, which is the plural of nid, and carries the meaning of likeness or equal. The same meaning is conveyed in the word nadid and
نديدة.
nadida.
قال في النهاية لابن الأثير أصل النزه البعد وتنزيه الله تبعيده عما لا يجوز عليه من النقائص.
It was mentioned by Ibn al-Athir in his work and Nihaya, the origin of the word exalted and pure, carries the meaning of farness or being remote. So in the context, it means declaring Allah far and remote from any shortcomings that is not permitted to attribute to Him.
Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is exalted and pure from any shortcomings that could be attributed to Him. So in the text it says, وَتَنَزَّهَ عَنِ الصَّحِبَةِ الْأُولَادِ, which translated, He is exalted above any likeness and rivals and pure of any need of consort children, which was used from وَتَنَزَّهَ, pure of any consort children. So he said it means to be far and remote from any shortcomings that is not permitted to attribute to Him. Right?
The intellects cannot fathom Him, while the hearts cannot imagine Him. There is nothing like Him, while He is the all-seeing, the all-hearing.
Surah Shura, 42nd Surah 11.
He possesses the most beautiful names and the loftiest attributes. The most merciful is above the throne. He has possession of all of what is in the skies, the earth, what is between them, and even what is under the constellations, and whatever you should utter. He knows fully what is secret and what is revealed.
All right, that's Surah Taha, the 20th Surah, ayat 5 to 6. قال الدومي الثرى التراب الندي.
Ad-Dumi, this word referring to what is under the constellations, is in reference to the small particles of dust that also contain moisture.
All right, so that expression, وَمَا تَحْتَ الثَّرَى, right, and what's under there is also not just talking about the constellations, but it's talking about what is under the constellations in reference to the small particles of dust that contain moisture. So now one word that's in there.
He indeed compasses all in knowledge, while being in complete control of each and everything by way of might and judgment. He surrounds everything in mercy and knowledge. He knows what is in front of them, what is behind them, and they do not encompass Him in knowledge.
Okay, that's Surah Taha, the 20th Surah, ayah 110.
He is to be described in the manner that He has spoken of Himself in His grand book, or according to the statements of His noble Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of what has been brought in the Quran or is authentically related by the Chosen One, peace and blessings be upon Him, regarding the attributes of the Most Merciful, is compulsory to believe. Whatever has been related must be met with submission and acceptance, while abandoning investigation into by way of rejection, interpretation, likening the expressions to the creation, or giving likeness to the Creator as we would a creator as we would the creation. Any expression such as that which would be ambiguous, it is necessary to affirm the wording while abandoning the seeking of meaning of the text.
قال الدومي في بعض النسخ نثبته لفظا ونتحاش عن التعرض لمعناه.
Ad-Dumi. So in one manuscript of narration it reads, so we affirm it in wording and stay away from seeking its meaning.
Okay, so this is in one of the narrations. The narration, the most popular one is وَنُرُدُّ عِلْمَهُ إِلَى قَائِلِهِ وَنَجْعَلُ حُجَّةُ عَلَى نَاقِلِهِ. Right? But in one riwayah, it is وَنُثْبِتُهُ لَفْظًا وَتَتَعَاشَ عَنَ تَعَرُّضِ لِمَعْنَى, which helps you give a greater understanding of what the general reading is when you have these other readings.
We are to leave the knowledge of the expression to the speaker and the responsibility of the knowing its meaning to the one who narrated it. This is in accordance with following the way of those who well grounded in knowledge. Allah praised these people in His clear book when He, glorified and exalted be He, said, those who are well grounded in knowledge say, we believe in it. All of it has come from our Lord.
Surah Al-Imran, the 3rd Surah, 7.
He, Allah, in mentioning the blameworthy nature of those seeking the meaning of the mutashabihah pages of His revelation,
passages.
passages of his revelation said, "Those who have a disease in their hearts follow what is ambiguous, seeking tribulation, seeking its meaning, and no one knows its meaning except Allah."
Surah Shura, the 42nd, excuse me, Surah Al Imran, the 3rd Surah, Ayah 7. And then this should also be the same thing for here. So that's a typo in 102, right? So that should be Surah Shura, 42nd Surah, 11 should actually be Surah Al Imran, the 3rd Surah, Ayah 7. Right.
Allah with this ayat made seeking the meaning of the text a sign of the disease in the heart, and he equated it with seeking evil and tribulation, both being held as blameworthy. So he veiled them from that which they saw, and blinded them from what they were seeking according to the words of the glorified one, and no one knows the meaning except Allah. Imam Abu Abdullah Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Hanbal, may Allah have mercy on him, regarding the statements of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, indeed Allah descends to the lowest sky, and indeed Allah will be seen in the hereafter, and other statements said the following: we believe in it, attest to it, without meaning. We do not deny any of it, but we know that what the messenger came with is true, and we do not reject the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
وقال الدومي أي لا نقول كيف هي ولا نقول معناها كذا وكذا، بل نقول صفة أثبتها تعالى لنفسه فنحن نثبته له ونكل كيفيته ومعناه إليه تعالى.
Ad-Dumi. This means that we don't say how is it, and we don't say it means thus and so. Instead, we say that it is in the attributes that the Exalted One has affirmed for himself. So we affirm it for him, and the how meaning of it back to him. Exalted
واعلم أن هذا ما كان عليه السلف كلهم والأئمة المقتدى بهم وذهب إليه المحققين من الخلف ومنهم كبار علماء الأشاعرة.
You should know that this is what Allah, you should know that this is what all of the first three generations were upon, and the Imams that followed them, as well as the sincere researchers from the latter day of generations. Among those latter day scholars are the senior scholars of the Ash'ari.
Okay, so the Ash'ari scholars in their latter phase also went back to this, because they went deep into Neoplatonist Greek philosophy, and it harmed them. So the latter day Ash'aris, such as Imam Ad-Dumi, who wrote al-Barahin, or Al-Aqidat al-Saghira, or other things that's known by the same kitab, they went towards the other direction of the first three generations again and closed discussion on philosophy and the like, what they said. فقد قال الشيخ محمد بن يوسف السنوسي الأشعري في شرح صغير له على عقيدته المعروفة المشهورة عند الكلام على قوله والكلام الذي ليس بحرف ولا صوت من نص بالحرف.
The Sheikh Muhammad ibn Yusuf as-Sunusi al-Ash'ari said the following in commentary on his own well-known creed text. Under this section, the speech is neither with letter nor sound.
وكنه هذه صفة وسائر صفات الله جل وعز محجوب عن العقل كالذات العلية.
This meaning of this attribute and the rest of the attributes of Allah Almighty and Majestic is hidden from the intellect, just like in the case of the exalted essence.
فليس لأحد يخوض في الكنه بعد ما يجب لذاته تعالى وصفاته.
It is not for anyone to debate in the essence of that after what has been made compulsory clear that he is to believe of his essence, exalted be he, and his attributes.
وما يوجد في الكتب من التمثيل بالكلام النفسي إنما هو للرد على المعتزلة حيث قالوا إن الكلام لا يوجد من غير حرف ولا صوت وفيه من كلام الفصحاء.
And whatever you find in the Ash'ari books that seem like giving semblance with discussing the speech established in the essence, this is only to rebuke the Mu'tazila when they say the speech is not present without either letter nor sound, and there is the speech of the eloquent ones.
إن الكلام لفي الفؤاد وإنما جعل اللسان على الفؤاد دليلا.
Indeed, feelings give rise to speech. The tongue is evidence of the feelings by way of speech.
وما قصدوا إلا التمثيل من حيث الحرف والصوت فقط. فأما الحقيقة ففجر صفات الله تعالى أن يمثلها شيء من صفات خلقه.
And they don't intend anything except drawing likeness and semblance with the letter and sound alone. As for the reality of the affair, it is not the case that the attributes of Allah have any semblance at all to any of the attributes to the creation.
فإن كلامنا النفسي فيه حروف متعاقبة تنعدم وتحدث، ويوجد فيه تقديم وتأخير وترتيب وغير ذلك، فاعرف هذا. وقد زلت فيه أقدام لم تؤدم بنوم من الملك العلام.
Indeed, our inner speech has letters that follow along and cease to be and get caught off, come into existence and are created. There is presence in human speech, eloquence, organizational structure, and other than that. Understand this point as indeed the feet of many have slipped on this topic when not strengthened with the light of the King, the All-Knowing.
Okay, so this is what he said regarding the middle and early Ash'ari scholars. Their feet slipped on this topic. So he's saying, listen, stop talking about that the speech of Allah is without letter or sound. Stop talking about it like this, because that was only done to refute the Mu'tazila. You shouldn't be talking about these things. Leave that stuff alone. And he said himself, the feet of many slipped on this topic. So Sanusi went back towards the other way, which is the first three generations. هذا كلامه فقد باح بالحق وأعرض عن المشاغبين، وقد أوضحنا هذا في كتاب مسمى به المدخل المذهب الإمام أحمد بن حنبل، وأعاننا الله على تبعه.
So these are his words on the topic. He has stated the truth and pulled away from those who exaggerate. We have further clarified this in our word entitled The Introduction to the Madhab of the Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and may Allah assist us in its printing.
All right, which was already printed as well. ولا نصف الله بأكثر مما وصف به نفسه بلا حد ولا عيب.
We do not describe Allah with more than that He has described Himself with, but He is without boundaries and without limit. There's nothing like Him, while He is the all-hearing, the all-seeing.
Surah Ash-Shura, 42nd Surah, Ayah 11.
We say just as He said. We describe Him how he has described Himself, and we do not transgress that. No description given could reach Him. We believe in all of the Quran, the decisive, the allegorical. We do not use falsehood to negate any of His attributes. We do not transgress the Quran and the Hadith. We do not know the essence of it, only the testifying to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and affirming the Quran.
قال الدومي في نسخة نؤمن بالقرآن كله مجمله كنه الأمر حقيقته.
Ad-Dumi, in one narration of the manuscript, it reads, we believe in the Quran in totality and its generality. In terms of the expression, the essence of it, this means the reality of it.
Okay, so in one narrative, نؤمن بالقرآن كله محكم متشابه. This is the more popular one. But another one, نؤمن بالقرآن كله مجمله محكمه. Right?
Imam Abdul Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, may Allah be pleased with him, said, I believe in Allah according to what came from Allah, according to what Allah intended. And I believe in the Messenger of Allah according to what came from the Messenger of Allah, according to what the Messenger of Allah intended, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is the principal way of the first three generations and Imams who came forward. May Allah be pleased with who came after us. May Allah be pleased with them. All of them agreed upon affirmations of the text, passing it by and affirming what was related to the attributes in the Book of Allah, the Sunnah of His Messenger, without seeking the meaning. We have been commanded to follow in their footsteps and seek guidance by their illuminated ways.
وقال الدومي وهذا الحديث رواه الإمام أحمد في مسنده عن عباد بن سارية من مسنده وقد اختصره المصنف هنا. وأوله من عربات قال صلى بنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم الفجر ثم أقبل علينا ووعظنا موعظة بليغة وذرفت له العيون ووجلت منه القلوب فقلنا وقالوا يا رسول الله كأن هذه موعظة المودع فأوصينا فقال.
Ad-Dumi. This hadith has been collected in the Musnad of the Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal from the narrative of Al-Irbad ibn Sariya, while the author had summarized it here.
So what he's talking about is the author, Imam Wafid al-Qudama, rahimahullah, will often summarize a hadith in order to make it in a bite-sized form and chunky enough to where you can memorize it with the particular portion of the text. But what he's doing is now fleshing out the whole hadith. This is where you find it, this is where it's located, this is the entire hadith.
The beginning of the hadith from Al-Irbad runs, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed Fajr with us, and upon completion turned to face us and delivered a strong address that caused our tears to flow and our hearts to shudder. We said, or they said, Messenger of Allah, it is as if you are delivering a farewell address. He said,
أوصيكم بتقوى الله والسمع والطاعة. من كان عبدا حبشيا فإنه من يعيش منكم فسيرى بعدي اختلافا كثيرا فعليكم بسنتي.
I advise you to have taqwa of Allah, to hear and obey, even if the leader put over you be an Abyssinian slave. Whoever among you should live after me will see much differing indeed. You must follow my sunnah.
الحديث رواه بنحو هذا من طريقين أخيرين ورواه بالنحو أيضا أبو داود بن ماجه والترمذي وقال حسن صحيح.
This is the hadith, and it has been narrated in this way from two pathways of transmission. It has also been narrated by Imams Abu Dawud ibn Majah and At-Tirmidhi, who said of it, it is Hasan Sahih hadith.
وقال الحافظ عبد الرحمن بن رجب البغدادي الحنبلي في كتابه جامع العلوم والحكم عند قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم فمن يعيش بعدي فسيرى اختلافا كثيرا فعليكم بسنتي الحديث.
Al-Hafiz Abdul Rahman ibn Rajab al-Baghdadi al-Hanbali, in his works The Collected Sciences and Wisdoms, said at the point of hadith, whoever amongst you should live after me will see much differing indeed. You must follow my sunnah.
هذا إخبار منه صلى الله عليه وسلم بما وقع في أمته بعده من كثرة الاختلاف في الأصول الدين وفروعه وفي الأقوال والأعمال والاعتقادات.
This is a narration from him sallallahu alaihi wasallam according to what his ummah would fall into after him regarding the difference of opinion in the foundational peripheral matters and the religion in words, deeds and creed.
وهذا مرافق لما روي عنه من افتراق أمته على 79 فرقة وأنها كلها في النار إلا فرقة واحدة وهي من كان على ما هو عليه وأصحابه.
And this agrees with what was narrated from him on the topic of the splitting of this ummah into some 70 or more sects, with all of them in the fire except for one, and that one is upon what he and his companions are upon.
وكذلك في هذا الحديث أمر عند الافتراق واختلاف بالتمسك بسنته وسنة الخلفاء الراشدين من بعده.
And likewise, in this hadith, it is an important affair that at the time of the splitting into sects and difference of opinion, one is to take hold of his sunnah and the sunnah of the rightly guided successors after him.
والسنة هي طريقة المسلوكة فيشمل هذا التمسك بما كان عليه هو وخلفائه الراشدون من الاعتقادات والأعمال والأقوال وهذه هي السنة الكاملة.
And the sunnah here is referring to the path travelled, and it in general covers what he and his rightly guided successors were upon with respect to creed, deeds and words. And indeed, this is the complete sunnah.
ولهذا كان السلف قديما لا يطلقون اسم السنة إلا على ما يشمل ذلك كله وروى معنى ذلك عن الحسن والأوزاعي والفضيل بن عياض.
And it is due to this that the first three generations did not refer to an affair as the sunnah, except that it was covered all of what was mentioned, and the meaning of this has been narrated by Al-Hasan, Al-Awza'i, Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad.
وكثير من العلماء المتأخرين يخص اسم السنة بما يتعلق بالاعتقادات لأنها أصل الدين والمخالف فيها على خطر عظيم.
And many of the latter-day scholars specify the expression, the Sunnah, as what is connected to the aspects of the creed as it is the foundation of the religion, and opposition and disputation in it is a real danger.
قوله عضوا عليها بالنواجذ معناها كما في النهاية تمسك بها كما يتمسك العاض بجميع الأضراس.
As for the statement, cling to it stubbornly, the wording is literally bite down on it with the molar teeth. The meaning of this has been mentioned in Niyah.
Yeah, that should be nihaya. That's a typo.
Nihaya, as clinging to it just as the molar teeth are used to hold something over all the other teeth.
وله معنى آخر يقال فلان عض على ناجذه أي الصبر تصل في الأمور ونواجذ أقصى الأسنان.
And this also has another meaning in which it said such and such is holding firmly to this, and it refers to patience that is brought to bear in all affairs. The molar teeth are actually the upper teeth in the mouth on both the lower and upper part of the mouth. We were warned about on the lower and upper part of the mouth.
Okay, so that's his commentary, Imam Ad-Dumi. Now we'll return to the text. We'll read this last portion, then we're complete with our portion for today.
The companion, Abdul.
So we were warned about the new.
Okay. We were warned about the newly invented matters, informed that they are part of the ways of astrayness. Indeed, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "You must follow by Sunnah and the Sunnah of the rightly guided successors after me. Hold on to it stubbornly, but beware of the newly invented matters. For every newly invented matter is an invention, and every invention is every innovation is astrayness."
Okay, so that's the end portion that the Imam explains, and this is where we've written. أقول قولي هذا استغفر الله لي ولكم استغفر الله إن الله غفور رحيم حميد رحيم. Now, before we open for any questions the slaves of Allah have, I just want to touch on one portion, which is Bismillah, page 83. Okay, now page 83, it reads, I advise you to have taqwa of Allah, to hear and obey, even if the leader put over you be an Abyssinian slave. Now there's another in one part in Al-Bukhari that reads, even if the leader should be an Abyssinian slave whose head is shaped like a raisin. What is this to do with? Yes.
Is to do with the history written in the autobiography of Ibn Hisham.
Yes.
When this was before the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when an Abyssinian was jealous of the pilgrimages to Mecca, and he sought after to destroy the Haram Sharif because nobody would visit his sort of copy or like innovation of the Haram.
Yes, this is correct. Some people will quote this hadith and the other one in Bukhari as if this is something to do with like racial equality. That's nothing to do with racial equality at all. It says, follow even if the emir over you should be an Abyssinian slave. Why? How long did the Abyssinians rule over Yemen in that area? 72 years, yes? Now, Ariyat had what? He had Ariyat battled against Abraha al-Ashram. Why was he called al-Ashram? Why was he called al-Ashram? He had the slash on his face, which made him look like a raisin. So, even if you're emir, so they were ruled over by Abyssinians and there was enmity between them. Here you have the Rasulullah saying, even if you're ruled over by an Abyssinian slave with a head that's shaped like a raisin. So even if he looks like Abraha al-Ashram, you still have to accept it. Because these people ruled over, there was enmity between the Abyssinians and them. This is why there was enmity sometimes between Bilal and Abu al-Ghifari, because they remember the period in Jahiliyyah where Abyssinians ruled over. It had nothing to do with, this is a hadith that shows that skin color doesn't matter, black or white. The hadith has nothing to do with that at all in the least. Because the concepts of black and white didn't exist yet. That wouldn't be until May 1720 in Virginia. This is thousands of years before that event. This is talking about, even though you may have enmity, because the Abyssinians had ruled over you before, if someone happens to be an Abyssinian, becomes a Mir over you, you should still let him rule over you. He's your Amir. Even if he should be an Abyssinian, that's head shaped like. So even if he looks like Abraha al-Ashram, he should rule over you. This has nothing to do with, people have taken it and linked it to slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. And what on earth are you idiots talking about? That hadith has nothing to do with that in the least. But you leave it to them. They'll turn everything into a soap opera or something that's not connected to. So it's good you brought this out. So this hadith is in reference to that. So I advise you to have taqwa of Allah, to hear and obey, even if the leader put over you be an Abyssinian slave, right? So even if it's an Abyssinian slave, right, because you'd had Abyssinians over you before, and there was still enmity between the Arabs and the Abyssinians. But that shouldn't be a factor in this deen. So the issue with Bilal wasn't between Bilal Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, wasn't because Bilal had dark skin or because he was a slave. It was because of that past where the Arabs had been ruled over by Abyssinians and there was enmity. Because Bilal at that point, although he was a slave, was uppermost in other ways. Bilal wasn't lower. He was uppermost in a lot of other ways, which is why when you look at the history of the Quraysh, they went out of their way to humiliate him. Why? Because he had black skin. No, you idiots. Because Muhammad ibn Maslama was darker than Bilal. And he was a slave Arab. He was darker than Bilal. Muhammad ibn Maslama was a Sahabi who was an Arab and was darker than Bilal. But they didn't humiliate him. Why did they humiliate? Because Bilal came from a nation that was uppermost. When the Muslims came to Ethiopia, were they uppermost or were they weak?
Weak.
They were weak. They were weak. So that enmity existed between them is normal. So they went out of the way to go after Bilal, to humiliate him, to try to break that spirit. It had nothing to do with Bilal he was black, and that's why we need to not be racist against this is completely irrelevant. Bilal didn't have any of the hang-ups that people today have about that stuff. None of it. None of that stuff existed. Do not take today's stuff and then try to bring it back into the past. It's like a Muslim brother asked me, were there any Pakistani companions? There wasn't a Pakistan. And I say that because that's a sickness. Because the group of people that are under that umbrella, they don't exist. There are Sindhis, Punjabis, all the other, that's what exists back then. None of that stuff, forget that. Where I noticed there's no Sahabi mentioned as being Bosnians. Yeah, because that doesn't exist. There's no Yugoslavian Sahaba. They don't exist. Because that's fake. Turkish is fake. That stuff is fake. What are these people really coming from? That's why this hadith is important to understand in its context. Because there was real enmity between the Arabs and the Abyssinians, because the Abyssinians have been a powerful colonial power and still were at that point. Not because they were black and they ruled over and it was a slavery thing. Get off that nonsense. Because the Janjaweed militias of Darfur that were killing people in Darfur that were not Arabs, the actual desert Arabs of the Janjaweed militia are darker than the people they're enslaving. So it's nothing to do with skin color. The Janjaweed, the desert Arab militias are darker than anyone they're enslaving. Get off that nonsense. Because you stay on that, I'm telling you, the people that are obsessed with race, they won't memorize anything. They won't go far in the game. And that's why those people fall in and out of the religion. They don't. And I tell brothers, like I've said before, they have to make a decision. You become Muslim, that has to be the dominant thing. So I say the same thing. You're either Muslim or you're black. You can't be both. You can't be a black nationalist and a Muslim. You're either a Muslim or you're Arab. You can't be an Arab nationalist because that's communism. And we saw that they've lost 10 wars against the Jews. And they'll get beat again. Because you won't beat them with that. You cannot be a nationalist in terms of the rah-rah our flag stuff and be successful in the deen and have Allah bless. It's not going to happen. Your culture, that's one thing. If, this is our culture, we're talking about that. But deifying your culture or putting it at the level of religion, you won't be victorious. That's the one thing we can learn from the Jews, the state of Israel. They put their religion over it. When they get in trouble, they fall back on their religion. That's why they won 10 wars and lightning losses. Every lightning war they win. That we can take that from the Jews. So, questions over what we've covered so far today. We have touched down, we've done exactly 2 pages, and touched down all the way up to page 86, inshallah. Okay? So are there questions of what we've covered so far today?
Yeah.
Yes.
Trying to find it. There was a part where it mentioned in the commentary that there's a slightly different wording in a different narration.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know whether I believe it was a section like if or matn? Was it that part?
Yes.
And there was as a variation in terms of the wording of it. Which of the narrations is that one from?
That one is going to be from Ibn Khabbaz. Muhammad ibn Khabbaz. That's the next most popular narration. So all the variations that he's quoting here are going to be from the second most popular narration, which is Ibn Khabbaz.
Okay. And so the time of death of the 3 narrators that I mentioned here are quite a while after the Imam Qudama.
Yes.
So how did these come about?
Because the manuscripts that were handed down, these narrators, they're the chief narrators from him. So these narratives existed in his lifetime. Because when he studied the Lum'a and he taught people, these narratives existed. But different narratives were taught to different people, and they handed those down, and these 3 people became the chief narrators. So those narratives were there, but they became the chief people that narrated them down to the ages to other people through students of the Imam and others.
Right, so these are the only narratives that existed at the time of the Imam as well. Okay.
Any other questions? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. So this is a commentary on the Lum'a, and the main purpose of this commentary is to flesh out what we're supposed to believe, but not necessarily bring into discussion what we're not supposed to believe, because that's is that outside the scope of this book?
Our point is what we're supposed to have iman in, what we have to have iman in, and then at the end of the text or near the end, he starts to talk about, well, here's some cults. Here's some groups. Because after we're established, once everything's established, now you can talk about, well, they have this position. They have that position. Because now you've been fortified. But often people will start out where they'll discuss i'tiqad, they'll discuss creed from the standpoint as if they're at intermediate or advanced level and discussing that, when it's like, no. Let's get the things established on what the Lum'a is based on, because the Lum'a was a restatement of the theology of the first 3 generations. It's a restatement of that. Again, to reaffirm it. He took Imam Ahmad's creed text, boiled them down into a rhyming text, gave it, so it's a restatement, a repurposing of it, which is what the point that was.
Therefore, if any certain texts that come up in here, which we may recognize as certain things that are taken out of context by the Ash'ariyah, or let's say the Salafiyah, would that be inappropriate for me to ask a question on that?
No, you can ask about that, because this is about establishing it. This is an establishment text, but we're not going to go into a whole lot of detail. So if you ask about it, I will answer it, but I won't. If you notice how I've gone about it, even you can see from the beginning of how we've done things, I haven't added too much to what the author said. So we're going through. So if you ask about, hey, well, what about this? I'll answer it, but I won't offer it in the class, because this is about affirming and establishing things. But if you ask, I will do it. All right. Yes.
So regards to it says in the text on page 86, hold on to it stubbornly, but beware of the newly invented matters, for every newly invented matter is an innovation, and every innovation is a strainus. So when it says every newly invented matter and every newly invented matter is a strainus, this is usually quoted by certain groups to say that anything and everything that where we use advancements or anything in which way it's not been mentioned directly by Quran and Sunnah, we cannot and should not use.
Yes, and this is we know this is nonsense, because if we go back to the statement of Imam Ibn Rajab at the onset of this hadith, he says something very important. He says this narration from him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on page 84, he said, according to what his ummah would fall into after him regarding the differences of opinion in the foundational and peripheral matters of the religion, in words, deeds, and creed. Right? So he's now breaking down and saying, when we talk about every innovation, we're talking about the innovation in the fundamental matters. Right? So Ibn Rajab and others understand that's what that reference is. All right? Any other questions? Any other questions? No? So we'll close from here and we'll be starting from next week, inshallah. وقال عبد الله مسعود رضي الله عنه اتبعوا ولا تبتدعوا فقد كفيتم. So we'll be starting from that page. So we'll do 2 pages at a time, which will pretty much take us a unit at a time. And then we'll be complete, inshallah, in 10 weeks. And we're carrying on from there. So we say, Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk innahu ghafurur rahim rahmi wa la ilaha illa Allah wassalamu alaykum. Dead on point. Exactly how it is. Good stuff. Alhamdulillah. All right.